Hi there, this is the Common Magician, and this is a follow-up to a recent video that I posted dealing with the any card at any number. I did it 10 times on the video, and in a very sterile way, fairly devoid of presentation, other than the necessary kinds of motions that you have to go through. And what I was demonstrating was a particular approach to those kinds of effects in dealing with really an endless amount of multiple outs. You're dealing with various kinds of treatments and outs in order to make the situation work out magically. And those are just some of the kind of simple, the simple ways that I do it. Some people have very elaborate methods for dealing with multiple outs in a full deck of cards. You can have quite a series of predetermined outs for particular values and suits and whatnot. I don't do that. I'm more streamlined and more simplified. In the very first example, I showed you what I call the universal out for that kind of effect, where if you get a number, you get a card, and they really are not workable. You just treat them individually as if that was the plan, and then follow up with a hands-on any card at any number, and then and the one that I do that involves the cut, the crisscross force, which I'm going to talk about in a minute here. That one I think can be portrayed quite hands-off if you have the right pattern, which of course I didn't do on the video. But if you follow up with a hands-on approach that looks quite hands-off, what you end up with is a kind of a conflation of the two different effects as one, right? So the spectator recalls free choices the entire time. They merely called out a card and a number the first time, and then they were individually found a card at a number and a number for a card. And then you follow that up with another, what appears to be as free a choice, even though it really isn't, not entirely. And it seems to be done with as little control, but it really isn't, although it seems to be. And then you kind of conflate that all together. So you really end up in the perfect scenario either way. So even with the universal out that I call it, but I tend to do that more than what I showed on the video. If I have some things that some numbers, a number in a card that's called out that are not really within just a couple of cards alteration, or within the setup of outs that I already have built into the deck, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. If I don't have that, I usually go right to that universal out. If I don't just go to the hands-on version of ACAN in the first place, which is what I usually do, because I don't often keep a stack with me. But if I do have the stack, I will use it. I will try to get a good outcome with it. What we're going to talk about here is actually a follow-up that I knew would happen. One of the reasons why I did those 10 examples is because I knew that some things were going to be presented with repetition that would really be noticed. And that is some of the discrepancies that are there, because they're worth talking about. I didn't have anything in there that wasn't done on purpose. There's no oversight. Okay, so when you notice a discrepancy or two, there's no oversight there. I'm fully aware of it, and I actually want to talk about it. And then another thing that came up was the idea of presentation and cause, which I've already done a video on years ago, 3 years ago, I think I did a video on that. But I'm going to bring it up again here because it's an older video. It may be kind of way down in the queue. No one's going to see it. So I'll just talk briefly about cause and effect a little bit here as well, just to address that one comment and to make a discussion out of it. So discrepancies. Here's the discrepancy. Whenever I did each one of these, and almost all of them, I don't know if there were any that didn't have this moment in it, which I was surprised, because the probability should have placed at least one or two of those examples without having to do this. And maybe some of them I wouldn't have had to do it, but my brain with math is so caveman, right? I'm so bad with simple math especially when the heat is on, that I preferred to do the following. So this is what you noticed. Boxes here, cards are here. I started all of them with this, and this was a major point in the follow-up discussion on the videos. I talked about the idea of shuffling at the onset. So shuffle the cards to begin with, and then put them in the box and get them out of the way. Do this without really making a deal out of it. Just do it. Don't call attention to it. Just do it. Maybe as you're saying something else, excuse me, you always see this coffee sitting here and I never use it. I needed a drink. But if you shuffle without making a deal out of it, it actually allows you to be hands-on with the deck afterward. Whereas if you just had the cards in the box from the onset and you had to make a cut or perform, and some of you talked about, well, why don't you do a slight rather than do it open? Well, I'll address that a little bit here in a minute. I'd rather be open. When I deal with discrepancies, I'll explain that. But why not just do a slight to handle the situation? Well, I prefer not to. I prefer to do things openly so the heat is off, right? So I find that when I do something openly, when I control openly, no one questions it. They just don't. If you just cut the deck openly and you're doing it without cover and without trying to be covert about it, it's just something that you do in the open. People don't care. If you don't care, they don't care. So I find that that's very useful, and it does something for me. It takes the heat off. It means that I don't have to hide anything, and that's just less to worry about. So presentationally, for me, I prefer to do that. Now, some people may not. Some people would prefer to do a sleight and just depend on their sleight of hand skills to deal with that and do some kind of a shift. Or someone talked about the reverse spread. I'm familiar with that. I just prefer to do it open because it's less to worry about. For me, I find that no one ever calls out open control. So, and that works within reason. So I do justify some of it, though. You'll notice that whenever I do the open control, I always resort to the David Berglas. If it's not on the top or the bottom, I can't take credit for it. And that has very vague meaning, right? When you say that, what do I actually mean by that? There's a couple of different interpretations. It's kind of good word salad that justifies the motion of taking a few cards off and showing them and then putting them back in a different place, which is the discrepancy. But the major discrepancy is this. You note that most of these cases, I took the cards out and then I went like this. And then I moved on. And even whenever I needed to make an alteration, I did that anyway, and then I changed the cards. And the question is, why not just leave them on and change the cards? Well, two reasons. If I have to leave them on the top and I have to add, I don't want to count through those cards face up. Now, I could do this. And I actually have outs for that, and they didn't present. Now, the probability should have been that you should have seen me do this once or twice, where I include the jokers. I have the jokers on the top for a reason, on purpose, so that I can do a count in a spread without having to show them, and I can include them. It gives me a slightly better than, because of some other issues, it gives me a slightly better than 1 chance in 13 that I get a solid hit without having to change anything. That's why I include them on the top. Some people prefer to include jokers in the deck at known points, and then you can discount them if you want to. So if you're counting face up and you don't want the joker to be included, you can say, oh, there's a joker, don't count that. And then they just keep counting. Or if they count through the joker and you need it, you ignore the fact that it's there and it's just counted as one of the cards. You can even include the discrepancy, because we're talking about discrepancies, where they count through one joker, and then you want to get rid of one. They get to another one. You say, oh, ignore that joker. And that flies well because no one notices the fact that there was a joker the first time. And when you call the second one, the first one was ignored and forgotten. So you can do that. You can get away with that. I've seen some big names do that very thing in recorded events. So discrepancies are okay. So that gets to the point here. Why do this shuffle only to take a couple of jokers off as much as I did in those cases? Well, the reason is because nobody notices the discrepancy, right? If you're thinking as a magician and you're seeing this many times, and I no doubt some of you noticed it the first time, right? I have no doubt on that. And I would expect some of you to do that because you know everything surrounding what's going on here. But the point is that if you are going to do a false shuffle and not make a deal out of it, just do it and then place the cards into the box. So one thing that really covers for the discrepancy is the presence of the box. I get to, as I say, have my cake and eat it too, because I put the cards back in the box, and if I take them out later on, and I just very, again, nonchalantly, without making an issue of it, take them off. And the way I do it is I take them off and I look at them, and I show them as what they are, and then I set them aside. Right, and what this does is this subtly demonstrates exactly what I'm doing without mentioning it. They see jokers, they see them set aside. The presence of the box means that, well, what if they were in the box, right? What if they were in the box and I put the cards in the box and I pick up the jokers? The differentiation in time between the shuffle, which you're already not making a big deal about, and then the removal of the jokers, which you equally are not making a big deal about, is a discrepancy. But it's a discrepancy with some already subtle cover because the box is present. But even without it, it's a discrepancy that I'm happy to have. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, right? Now, here's the question is should you try to eradicate all discrepancies from your magic? And the answer to that, I'm not going to say that it's up to you, and I'm going to give an answer. The answer is no. You should not. You actually cannot eradicate all discrepancies. And the reason for that is because some effects operate on discrepancy, right? So 12 and a half minutes to 10 minutes to get to that point. Some effects, some methods actually depend on the presence of discrepancy, so you can't eradicate them. What you do is you depend on the fact that discrepancies go unnoticed, right? That some discrepancies, if managed appropriately, can be helpful and not hurtful to your presentation. So some examples of this are torn and restored effects, where you tear up a piece of paper or a dollar bill or something like that, and maybe even a card, and a playing card. And whenever you go to do the unfold, many of those presentations and methods involve a discrepancy in the fold, where you actually have a fold that goes the wrong way from where you folded initially. And it's on purpose. You can try to get rid of that, but getting rid of that often means that technically you're placing ends of the paper or card in a place where you have to separate pieces. Whereas if you have a discrepancy in the fold, you don't have to worry about that in the presentation. You just do the discrepancy unfold, but you can do it very cleanly because that discrepancy allows you to get very clean control over the situation, because you have that opposing kind of situation, right? That Z sort of situation that's easy to manage. So, that kind of effect really depends on the discrepancy to make it better in terms of handling and cleaner and more efficient. You can eradicate it, but it works against you when you do something like that. You depend on the fact that the discrepancy goes unnoticed. Nobody notices it. It's not, you don't make an issue about, and you can see that I am unfolding this exactly the same way that I fold it. I mean, you don't, why point that out? You just do it. You do it and you don't worry about it. So that's one. Another one is switching devices. David at Magic Orthodoxy recently did a switching device. It was a card box switching device. Really clever. And there's deck switch devices. There's a single card switch devices like that one. There's other types of box devices, coin boxes, right? The Okito coin box. And there's certain kinds of handlings with those that actually inherently have discrepancy. There was one, what's the Engblom, the cooler, right? Was a box deck switch device that has a major discrepancy, but it doesn't matter. It works on the discrepancy. You just pay no mind to it. You don't point it out, right? You just do it. And the fluidity of motion and the fact that everything is done in a nonchalant way in the offbeat, it makes it work exceptionally well, right? Even though in the case of this one card switch box that I was alluding to, that one has a major overt discrepancy where if you were looking directly at it when it happens, it would be something that would kind of make a sort of, what just happened there kind of thing, right? It's how you treat it. It's that you treat it in the open, completely in the open, but without care and without attention and without focus, right? The baseline of misdirection, right? That's what you do. But it operates on discrepancy. Another thing that we can do that involves discrepancy, I actually did it in that example in the video, and nobody pointed that out. You already know what it is. But let's say that someone calls Jack of Diamonds, right? I take the cards out. I ditch the jokers. And then I say, go ahead and cut the cards, place the top right here, right? And then I say, now you could cut anywhere you want, any number of cards. And you freely thought of that card, right? The Jack of Diamonds. It's what came to your mind. And I didn't influence you in any way. And then you freely selected a place here on this deck, which was, obviously not in an order that you would know. And you can see that where you cut to was the Jack of Diamonds, right? The crisscross force is a discrepancy method. It operates on discrepancy. It has a discrepancy. And we do a little bit of what we call the time misdirection. And there's a lot of debate about whether that's even necessary. There was actually a study on this move. I wish I could, I didn't think about it before I recorded this. Maybe if I can find it, I'll put a link on there. But someone actually studied that particular move. It was a psychology group. And they wanted to know if spectators actually benefited from time misdirection, time delay. And what they found was that people who were even told what this was and what was happening still couldn't understand it. A large chunk, right? They found a very negligible difference between the people who had time misdirection, didn't have time misdirection, and then still a very large chunk of people who were told exactly what the thing was, what it was doing, and they still couldn't, it was still magical to them, right? So that's a discrepancy, and you can see that the discrepancy is necessary. You actually need to have it in order to make it work, and you try not to point it out, and you allow it to happen under the radar. So yeah, I am aware of this, right? In that it's a discrepancy and it's a contradiction. Why shuffle the cards and then remove two jokers from the top from a deck that should be out of order? It's a discrepancy that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I'm not pointing out the shuffle and I'm not pointing out the jokers. I'm ignoring the fact that both of those things happen, plus the introduction of the card box. If someone said, wait, didn't you shuffle the cards when I take these out? Say, oh, I forgot I left them in the box. And that's it. That's it. So, and that's never happened to me. No one's ever asked about that. I just do it. So, but it's a benefit that I prefer to do. Now, coming back to why not try to do something like this, and I have played around with this before. You could take the jokers and place them high, but close. So maybe within the first four cards, just always have them in there, and then you do the count face up all the time, and then either use them or don't use them. Say, oh, ignore the jokers, right? Well, the reason why is because 50% of the time I would be discounting them, and I don't want to do it. I would prefer not to do that. I would prefer to just leave them on the top and get them out of the way if I don't want them, or leave them in and deal with it with a spread count. And I have a way in dealing with it with a spread count where I then shift the deck at the selected card openly, right? Card is counted to, and then I pick them up and then respread, and the jokers disappear into the middle. So I have a way of doing that which includes the jokers and still looks like a clean presentation of a shuffled deck. So I have my own way of leaving the jokers in or taking them out that involves this discrepancy, and it just doesn't matter. So that's it. Now, should you attempt to eradicate discrepancies? Yeah, I think you should attempt to where it is beneficial. Where it is not beneficial and where the discrepancy helps, you should lean in on them and ignore their presence. I think that's really the appropriate way to deal with discrepancies when discrepancies are part of the method and they're part of the helping hand. So anyway, just a quick discussion about that. I do know it's in there. One of the reasons why I did this 10 times in a row and showed it to you is because inevitably someone was going to point that out, that there was a contradiction. And what I want to demonstrate is that it's okay. It's okay to have some contradictions. You can do things quite openly. I did no sleights in this apart from the shuffle, and a couple times I did some false cuts to justify the shuffle. Apart from that, which is completely separate from the presentation and the effect, it's only psychologically beneficial for the reasons why I talked about. Other than that, there's just no sleights going on. And you can do magic that is slightless and quite powerful with good presentation. Now, let's talk about presentation. So presentation, we have to define that. What is presentation? Presentation is about engagement. Presentation is not about the story itself. You can actually have very deeply thought presentation that has no story at all and has no verbiage to it, right? You can do things completely silently. Some people do that. They'll use music in their stage presentation for presentation, right? And music is what drives it. Some people will do things completely silently, kind of back to that 19th century magic where you didn't have music in the parlor or in the theater, and you would just go through the motions of doing something without, you would make very basic statements, right? I want to point out to you that the box begins completely empty. Close the box, turn it around, do something, right? Open the box and something is there. So there is that. You can have very minimalist presentation, but what you're dealing with, or very, very minimalist dialogue, but what you're dealing with in the presentation is the visual. You have to be thoughtful about that, right? Now, presentation can be about cause. It can be about cause, and that was the question was, well, if you shuffle the deck, then it can be about a chance opportunity. If you don't shuffle the deck, then it can be about mentalism, and that you are causing either the choice in a psychological way, or you are going deeper in the supernatural, you are reading the mind, right? These are all causes. These are causes to the effect. And that can be a major part of the presentation. And what I would say is that can be a major part of the presentation, but it is not necessary. You do not have to have cause. You don't have to have cause. There's no essential requirement to have cause. So you can choose to do it, but that's your choice. But you don't have to have cause. I actually choose often not to have any cause to anything. I don't point it out. I don't say it's magical. I don't say I'm reading your mind, or, following micro expression, or, there's all kinds of things that you can lean on in terms of cause. I often just do this kind of magic, just do it. Right. And what happens in the phenomenology and the phenomenon of that kind of engagement, that kind of presentation, is you leave a great deal of mystery. They're left quite puzzled because they don't understand, well, what did you demonstrate? Did that just happen by chance? Did you make it happen? Did you make me? It's all open. It's all on the table. That's really mysterious, right? When you leave everything out on the table. One thing that happens on purpose or inadvertently is that whenever you attribute cause, is you do take some things off the table. You now kind of pigeonhole. usually you're attributing cause because it's part of the misdirect, right? But when you attribute cause, you are actually narrowing the spectator's point of view. And I don't mean that in a bad way. If that's your intent, that's great, right? If you have a certain kind of a style and a presentational style, if you bill yourself a certain way, it's very useful to be consistent in attributing cause. But that's a choice. You don't have to do that. So anyway, a little bit of a discussion on that. You can make this a chance effect. You can make it a mentalist effect, or you can make it neither and both by not saying anything about it, by not really attributing cause at all. And in that, the presentation becomes the human aspect of engagement. What are you saying in the moment to the person? You know, is it fun? Is it funny? Are you joking? Is there situational comedy involved in it, right? Is it awkward, right? Being awkward on purpose is a presentation. Some people hate it. I have an uncle who cannot stand David Blaine, right? We to talk about this. He does not like him. Can't stand David Blaine for his presentational style. And I'll be honest with you, when I was younger, and I was a teenager when David Blaine hit this mainstream, when he started with his TV specials. My take on that, I was coming out of the David Copperfield, Lance Burton kind of stage magic. That's the kind of magic I saw on TV, right? And then David Blaine comes along, and I saw him, and I was like, I don't like this. It's weird and unsettling, right? But the recognition is that he's doing it on purpose. That is the presentation, is being awkward. He's being awkward on purpose, right? You can do that. That's a choice. That is part of the presentation. And then there's a happy medium where it's neither awkward nor is it very talky, right? You're saying minimal things, but you're not necessarily awkward. You're getting to the point. It's quick and efficient. Or on the other side, it is not really awkward. You're not saying much, but it does kind of take some time. There's a lot of ability there. So how do you distinguish what is good presentation and what is bad presentation? I think the answer is personal, and it is, does it work? That's the answer. Whatever you're doing, does it work? Is it engaging people? Right? Are you captivating them? Are you holding their attention one way or the other? When you get to the end, is the phenomenology, the phenomenon of the effect, does it have a sizable impact? Does it have a deep impact? Does it work? Or are you missing out on some beats and capability? Are you underperforming the effect in the presentation? That's the choice you have to make, right? And I think it's kind of a slippery slope for one person to judge too harshly someone else, because we're not the same, right? So when you see magicians, one person's looking at someone else's presentation and saying, well, this would work better if you did that. Well, no. I don't think you can conclude that, because it might work better for you to do that because of who you are and the way you work with people. But that really may not work with that person, right? There are some people that cannot do other people's presentations. It's a mistake to emulate too much. It's good to emulate people that are like you. That can be very beneficial. I'm a teacher. I'm a school teacher. The way I teach is based on things I've picked up from a lot of other people that are like me, right? That's where my vocabulary comes from. And then some of it's my own. I make it my own. I've come up with my own ways to deal with young people and to deal with parents and deal with administration and the way I work, right? It's all my own vocabulary, but a lot of it comes from adapting things that I've seen other people do, and it's usually people that are like me. I wouldn't adapt things that people do from people that are not like me, things that work for them that could never work for me because I'm not like them. either naturally or by choice, right? If that makes sense. So whenever you're talking about presentation, just keep in mind that's a huge umbrella that deals with much more than the story and the cause, right, to the effect. Anyway, a little bit on cause and effect there. So discrepancies, can they be present? Yeah, some effects and methods depend on discrepancy. You can't really eradicate them. Should you try to minimize them? I think that's a good idea, right? But you can choose for yourself whether or not the presence of a discrepancy is helpful or harmful. In my case, in this one, I think it's more helpful than harmful because of the way I want to deal with the cards. There's a way that I want to get there that it's beneficial to me to pop off those two jokers whenever I don't want to use them, right? To just remove them and set them aside openly. I'd rather do that and have the discrepancy present, which really isn't a big one because, again, the box is involved there. So I think really dwelling too much on that is making more of it than what it's worth. But it is there. It is present. You're right to note it. It does exist, right? I think that discrepancies can be very useful. They can make for very good slightless magic when you're using discrepancies rather than sleights, depending on a discrepancy moment, rather than having to do something covertly. If you can use a discrepancy in a way that goes unchecked, lean into that, use that stuff. Try to find some, right? That's actually a fun exercise is, okay, I need to accomplish this. My restrictions are such. Could I maybe do this with a discrepancy? Is there a way that I could, accomplish this by, there's a good one. People don't give it credit, but I remember from Animan, in one of the forces, it's kind of a bit of the topsy-turvy force, right? If you really think about the topsy or the cut deeper force or whatever, there's a couple of names for it, right? Cut deeper. If my card I'm going to force is the King of Spades, and you cut a small packet, cut a bigger packet, and then open spread to the first face-down card, right? That's a discrepancy. There's a discrepancy there. The Shinobi control is a discrepancy. You know what that is. There's some different kinds of things, substitutions, turnovers. A lot of them have that. But to get back on track, to evaluate, I'm here. These are my restrictions. I need to get to here. Can I create a discrepancy? And here's one from Animan, Six of Spades, is to have them deal into your hand, right? Say just deal any number of cards. Just deal until you're ready, right? Stop when you're ready, and they deal the cards into your hand, right? And once they get there, you just take the pile and you turn it over and say, and we end at the Six of Spades, right? So that's one. It's very bold. It's a very bold discrepancy, but it is a discrepancy. Another one is key card placement. It's better if it's used as a key card placement, but some people, I don't want to point it out directly, but by name. I'll just say it kind of under the radar here. But this one is good, right? Tell me when to stop. Stop right there, right? Two of diamonds. And that's the very bold one. One more is to do this. I'll just do it. Right. So it's like this. Tell me when to stop. They say stop, and you say, right, 2 2s, right? So it's you're doubly using a discrepancy to do a reveal. Yet it looks like the spectator made a choice on both, but it's out in the open. I mean, it's right there. If anyone looks at it on video and analyzes what's happening in the open, it's a discrepancy that drives the method. So discrepancies are good. They are good unless they're bad, if that makes sense. But anyway, that's my reply to that about the Joker situation. It's just what I prefer to do. So I use the Jokers as a means to get myself down to that more 1 chance in 13 of a very clean, clear hit, because I can count them or not count them. So I leave them on top. I also leave them on top for reasons in my stack that I didn't get into with ACAN, but it's actually part of my indexing system. And I did use the index on a couple of the examples in there when I made some cuts, and I indexed into the deck using some properties in the deck that you can learn about on my common stack video. But I use that as part of my index, these two jokers, and one of them is a double thick card. So the top joker is a double thick card. I can use that to get back to where I need to be. So, or I can use it as part of my count in other ways I'm not going to get into. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, but I want them there. I want them on top. It's where I want them to be for an enormous number of reasons. And doing this even after a shuffle means nothing to me, and it means nothing to them. So hopefully that explains it a little bit. So lot to talk about here. Discrepancies, cause to effect, and presentation. Take that for what it's worth. Good luck with that. Happy magicking.